Good morning, this is Jim Williams with your Hurricane City Tropical Update for September 1st, 8:30 a.m. Here's the water vapor loop of the Atlantic Basin from LSU. I like to use this map from time to time because it does show the dry air, which are the dark shaded areas. So let's go ahead and tell you what's happening out here. We have Hurricane Katia right in here in the mid-Atlantic, moving off to the west-northwest, but notice there's dry air being pulled into the system because of a big upper level low to the north. And that'll have ramifications to not only the strength of Katia, but the potential future track. Now we have another upper level low right here that's also moving off to the northeast. So these two upper level lows are not only going to cause westerly wind shear and unfavorable environment for Katia, but it also is going to drag dry air into the system and weaken the high pressure ridge out here to the east. And I'll get to the maps on that in just a minute. Now we also have a new system trying to develop in the Gulf of Mexico, 93L, somewhere in this range right here, although the National Hurricane Center seems to believe that the center is probably over here in the western Gulf of Mexico and it's going to develop there over the next couple of days. But there's also wind shear in that area due to yet another upper level low in this area, and that's kind of forcing some westerly wind shear in the Gulf of Mexico. So even though we have a lot of activity in the tropics, the pattern is not real favorable for development, but that could change in the Gulf in a couple of days. Now, as far as Katia is concerned, Katia could run into some problems as it gets north of the Caribbean Sea. It does not look like this is going to make it into the Caribbean, although there is the possibility that this system could get sheared and we could have a low-level exposed center, and the system could travel a little bit further south. We've seen that in the past. All right, let's go ahead and get to our images this morning. And first of all, let's start out with our models. And here we are from the Hurricane City model maps this morning. We have a consensus of models taking this continued west-northwest. Now, it's been interesting listening to the discussion, reading the discussions from the National Hurricane Center last 24 to 36 hours. We've had Richard Pash and Jack Bevan back and forth doing the discussions. And they've, and I mentioned this at Kane Talk, that I thought it was odd that they're kind of stopping it right there. They're not really talking about model possibilities beyond this point. They're only talking a 5-day forecast, and they're pretty much drawing a straight line. In fact, I'll show you the HurTrack program in a minute, showing the NHC track versus the best performing model in a second. But they're pretty much stopping it right here because after this point, there's a wide range of possibilities from moving west to moving north beyond this point, depending on how the ridge is set up and the troughs and everything else. So the Hurricane Center has been kind of mum on the potential because the models are kind of split on what could happen beyond this point. Let me go to the HurTrack program and let me zoom in on this image right here. This is the actually, I don't want to zoom in. It zooms in too much, but I will tell us straight what you're looking at. The red track here is the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. And the black track down here is the Gunna model. This is the best performing model. I think it's off by only about 75 miles. So obviously the National Hurricane Center is following closely the Gunna track. That model is pretty much taking it west-northwest and stops at this period out in here. So the question is, where is Katia going to go, and how is the system in the Gulf going to interact with all this? Let's get to some of the maps here and show you what's going on. First of all, the wind shear analysis from the University of Wisconsin is showing a big old wall of wind shear out in front of Katia here, 30-40 knots out in front of this system. A little bit higher up, the further away you get from Katia, the winds are a little bit higher in the upper levels, which shreds systems and does not allow them to develop. And then we have this other upper level low that's developing out here, moving this way. So there's going to be some sort of wind shear in here in the next couple of days that's going to potentially weaken the system. And they did mention in the last discussion that there may be a low-level exposed circulation on the edge of Hurricane Katia. And if that is the case, the system would remain weaker and possibly get pretty close to the northern Leeward Islands here as a weaker system as it moves off to the west-northwest. Now look what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico. 40 knots of wind shear all through our developing system out in the Gulf. So it's not looking favorable right now for any kind of development. But the system is in a highly sheared environment. And if anything gets going, it's going to be back in here somewhere. So this is going to take a few days. Now, where is all this going to go? Well, first of all, here's the wind shear tendency maps. And the orange maps, the orange on the map indicate increasing wind shear. So we have increasing wind shear in front of Katia, and we have increasing wind shear in the northern Gulf of Mexico over potential developing 93L, which could become Tropical Storm Lee. All right, here is the NOGAPS model. Now, the NOGAPS model, and this is going out about 5 days from now. And the NOGAPS did a pretty decent. The NOGAPS has had a pretty good year. Usually, the NOGAPS has a very left-biased and a poor track record on the future forecast of tropical systems. But this year, the NOGAPS has done a pretty good job. It did a good job on Emily and on Irene. And the NOGAPS is showing a building ridge over the northeastern United States at the time that Katia is north of Puerto Rico, which could have huge ramifications for the east coast of the United States. If this model were to pan out, then we would have a threat to the east coast from Katia. Now notice what happens with Lee over here, and I'm saying Lee because it probably will become at least a tropical storm, but the NOGAPS has this moving west because this high pressure ridge is going to budget towards Texas. Now Texas could use the rain. They're in a severe drought situation, so this would be great news if this happens. But the good news could lead to bad news for the east coast of the United States for a significant hurricane impacting the eastern seaboard if the NOGAPS pans out. Notice the NOGAPS closes the gap in here and does not leave a trough behind and forces Katia more to the west. So we're going to keep track of the NOGAPS and see if that pans out. Now here's the next model, and this is the Canadian model, the CMC. And this kind of does the same thing, although it leaves a little bit of a window here for this to continue to slip on out towards maybe Bermuda. But there is the high pressure here, which also sends Lee off to the west-southwest towards South Texas. This is after the development, of course. Lee would already be inland in South Texas as the ridge begins to build a little bit on the east coast. So this also would have potential possibility for landfall on the east coast if the Canadian pans out as well. And this is why I said the National Hurricane Center is a little bit reluctant to go out beyond 5, 6, 7 days because they're unsure of whether a ridge is going to build on the east coast or not. Now here is the ECMWF. This is the darling model of the global models, and the ECMWF, the European model here, is taking this system north. It does not show the ridge building on the east coast and pretty much keeps it away from the islands. Major hurricane heading towards Bermuda, so people in Bermuda need to watch closely. Now here's Lee over here, still over here in near Texas, Louisiana border as a pretty significant system, so we need to keep an eye on that. But that would, again, rain is good for Texas, except you don't want it all at one time where you have 20 inches of rain on a dry surface, because when that happens, there's no minimal level for absorption, and you can have water runoffs and streams overflowing their banks in a hurry, and a lot of mudslides and that sort of thing can happen when you have dry conditions, and all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of rain. So that would not be a great situation to have a real strong system come in there, but that's what the Euro is showing. Basically no high pressure out here on the east coast. It shows a weakness left behind by the trough, and the system moves off to the northwest and north. And here is the GFS model, and the GFS model also takes this north, kind of similar to the European model towards Bermuda. Very significant system up in here, and here's Lee, or some remnants of it, or a weak version of it, right up here in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So the GFS is indicating that we're going to have no ridge up here at all, and that Lee, whatever develops in the Gulf, will cross over to maybe up the eastern seaboard. There'll be a huge weakness out in here, and Katia will turn north. So the GFS and the Euro are both turning this north. The other models want to take the system to the west and build a ridge on the east coast, somewhat of a ridge. All right, here is the HFIP model, which is the HWRF interpolated, meaning additional information is put into it. And this system, I like to use this model of the HWRF because it's usually initializes the systems better on the first and second runs. And this has it more turning toward the west, towards the Bahamas, and does have some sort of ridging beginning on the east coast. So there's, again, a split in the models here, but the HFIP model wants to turn this off to the west. Now the GFDL model is following the GFS and the Euro and turning it north towards Bermuda, has a very significant system. So I'm beginning to wonder if we're going to have a stronger system at this point because of the wind shear that's supposed to take place out there with all these upper level lows. So that's going to be interesting to see if we have a stronger system versus a weaker system, maybe moving a little more to the west So the models are really split on this. And here is the GFDL model on Lee, and it shows Lee here in about 3 or 4 days making landfall at the Texas-Louisiana border as a minimal hurricane. So we'll keep an eye on that and see if that pans out. And here is the H-Wharf showing, the regular H-Wharf showing Katia moving northwest and then north towards Bermuda, and showing Lee heading towards the Florida Panhandle as a tropical storm. So there's about half the models that turn Katia north and bring Lee into the eastern seaboard, and then the other half of the models want to take it Lee towards Texas and Katia potentially towards the United States. So it's real interesting to watch how these models are going to pan out in the next few days. Now here's the steering flow as it stands right now. This is at the surface, and this is a real narrow ridge out here. Once Katia gets over here on the backside of this ridge, it's going to slow down its forward speed, and the indications are that it would begin to move northwest-northwest, which is what all the models are indicating at this point. But this doesn't go out 5 days from now, and this ridge over here would potentially move over a little bit, maybe enhance a little bit over here and shove it towards the west, or it's going to continue to show weakness here and sling out into the ocean. I've been tracking these systems for about 30 years, and I can tell you we've seen numerous systems like Katia moving across with models having it come toward the U.S. only to have the system either hit Bermuda or go between Bermuda and the United States. I think right now I would lean on the more reliable models, the GFS and the Euro, to turn this north, but it's a little too early yet to make the call on that. And if that does happen, that would lessen the rainfall potential for Texas from Lee, because Lee would more than likely go off to the northeast. So we'll watch all this closely. I'll be back with another update in about 24 hours on the situation. We may have Lee developing in the Gulf of Mexico by then. Now, I'm working on the archive from Hurricane Irene for the archive subscribers. A lot of editing involved with this, so it's really hard to get the update videos and the editing at the same time. But that video, once that's complete, I'll be able to spend a lot more time on both of these systems. But right now, I'm going to be editing this video down. You're going to really like what I have put together for Hurricane Irene, and that'll be available in a couple of days to archive subscribers. Well, that's it for now. We'll be back in a day or two with another update. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.